In the first quarter of 2026, over 50,000 tech jobs were cut in the US alone. Globally, the number climbs closer to 70,000 to 80,000, depending on how it's measured. And if you're working in tech right now, this doesn't feel like a sudden shock.
It feels like something you've been noticing for a while. Fewer open roles, longer hiring cycles, teams getting leaner. You're still employed, things still look stable, but there's a shift, and you can feel it. Not panic, just uncertainty. Because the question isn't really, will layoffs happen? It's, if they do, what are my options? And here's the part most people are getting wrong. It's not that hiring is disappearing. It's that it's moving. And the next hiring boom is already happening, just not in tech. To understand where things are going, you first need to understand why tech is slowing down. Because this isn't random, it's structural. For years, especially between 2020 and 2022, tech companies were hiring aggressively. Growth was the priority. Teams expanded quickly. Headcount increased across almost every function. Now that's reversing. Companies are correcting for overhiring. But that's only part of the story. The bigger shift is where money is going. Instead of investing heavily in hiring, companies are investing in infrastructure, in AI systems, in compute power, in long-term capabilities, which changes how they grow. Because instead of scaling through people, they're scaling through systems. And that leads to fewer roles being created, even when companies are performing well. At the same time, AI is increasing efficiency. Smaller teams can do more, which reduces the need for expansion. So when you combine all of that,
Overhiring correction, AI efficiency, and capital shifting, you get a very different job market, one that feels slower, tighter, more competitive. But that doesn't mean opportunity is gone. It just means it's showing up somewhere else.
when markets change, there's one thing that always tells you where things are going: capital. Where money flows, jobs follow. And right now, money is moving away from traditional hiring and into physical infrastructure, into things that support the next phase of growth: data centers, energy systems, industrial capacity, the foundation behind AI. Because AI doesn't just exist in software, it runs on real-world systems, massive compute facilities, power grids, cooling systems, network infrastructure. And all of that requires investment, which is exactly what's happening. Companies are spending billions to build this layer, which means the demand for talent is shifting there too. Not disappearing, just moving. The first major area where this shows up is data centers. AI is driving an explosion in compute demand, and that demand has to be supported physically, which means more data centers, more facilities, more infrastructure. But here's the problem: the industry can't keep up. It's estimated that up to 340,000 data center roles could go unfilled by the end of 2026. And more than 50% of operators already report struggling to find qualified talent. At the same time, nearly half of planned US data center projects are being delayed or constrained. Not because there's no demand, but because of limitations: power, supply chains, and people. This creates a bottleneck, and bottlenecks create opportunity. Because companies aren't just looking for traditional engineers, they need infrastructure specialists, project managers, operations professionals, people who can build, run, and scale these systems. And that demand is only increasing. The second area is even more fundamental: energy. Because everything we just talked about, Data centers, AI, infrastructure runs on power. And demand for that power is rising fast. In the US, electricity demand is expected to grow steadily, driven largely by data centers, industrial expansion, and electrification. In some regions, the growth is much more aggressive. Texas, for example, is expecting close to 10% annual electricity demand growth through 2027. And that's creating pressure across the entire system: generation, transmission, grid stability, which means more projects, more investment, and more hiring. The US clean energy workforce already employs millions of workers. And globally, the transition toward new energy systems is expected to create hundreds of millions of jobs over the next decade. But there's a problem. There aren't enough people to fill them, which means demand is growing faster than supply. And that gap is where opportunity exists. As infrastructure expands, so does risk, which is why cybersecurity is becoming critical, not just in tech companies, but in energy systems, data centers, and critical infrastructure. Because these systems can't fail, they can't go down, and they can't be compromised, which raises the stakes significantly. At the same time, the talent shortage in cybersecurity has been persistent for years, and it's getting worse as systems become more complex. What's changing now is the context. Security is no longer just about protecting applications. It's about protecting physical systems, power grids, industrial controls, data infrastructure, which creates strong overlap with tech skills, especially for people with backgrounds in cloud security, DevOps, systems engineering. And again, demand is there, but supply is limited. The fourth area is the least talked about, but one of the most critical: skilled trades. Because none of this infrastructure, data centers, energy systems, grids, gets built without people. Electricians, technicians, construction specialists. Right now, these roles are becoming a major bottleneck. A large portion of the current workforce is approaching retirement, and not enough new workers are entering the field. At the same time, demand is increasing, which creates a mismatch. Projects are being delayed, not because funding is missing, but because labor is. And while this might seem far from tech, it's actually connected, because many of these environments are becoming more digital, more automated, more integrated with software systems, which creates hybrid roles, where technical knowledge becomes increasingly valuable. So when you step back and look at everything together, the picture becomes clearer. Tech hiring isn't disappearing, it's shifting away from traditional roles and toward infrastructure, towards systems that support everything else: data centers, energy, security, physical networks. And for most people, the uncertainty comes from not seeing that shift clearly, from looking in the same places while the market is moving somewhere else. Because the opportunity isn't gone, it's just not where it used to be. And the key question becomes, where do I actually fit in this new landscape? Because in many cases, your skills are more transferable than you think. The challenge is mapping them correctly, understanding where demand exists and how you connect to it. So instead of trying to figure that out on your own, I built a simple tool, a short quiz that takes your current skills and maps them to roles and industries where hiring is growing, so you can see where you fit, what options you have, and what your next move could look like. It takes a few minutes, and it gives you clarity. If you want to check it out, you'll find it in the description below.